Good morning. So we're up to Beis, volume 2, page 1158. But we've been learning now, corresponding to those pages, actually a little earlier, 1151 and on, the Rebbe's Maimer, BaYom Shemini Atzeres, Tavshin Tezvav, which in the volume called Sefer Mamorim Tavshin Tezvav is on page, we began learning yesterday, from page 11, Yud Aleph, through Yud Gimel, 11 through 13. I'm going to continue now from there. So here the Rebbe essentially integrates into his Maimer the themes of Yesh, Ayin, and Yesh, which is from Ayin Beis, the three levels, and the middle Ayin, the Ayin in between, that channel divides into two. It's not one level from two different perspectives, it actually divides into two. So based on that, so you have two perspectives, Das Elyon and Das Tachten, that and the fact that Das Elyon and Das Tachten is the perspective from above, that above is Yesh and everything else is nullified. The perspective from below is Das Tachten, that the Yesh is existent and the Ayin is above it. And that Ayin divides into two, the Ayin of the Yesh HaAmit, the Ayin of the Yesh HaNivra. So even though generally there are three levels, Yesh, Ayin, Yesh, but the Ayin, when you break it down to detail, there's four levels in that sense. Okay. And now these two levels of Ayin are infinitely distant, as we can see from the fact that this one in other places explains, in Ayin Beis actually, that it's like before the Tzimtzum and after the Tzimtzum. Then we began Siv Gimel, where now, because the Pasuk says Kel Deis Havaya, so it's not just the perspective of the Creator and the perspective of the creation. In Havaya itself, there's two perspectives. So in the Mashpia itself, there's two perspectives: the perspective of Das Elyon, which is the Ayin of the Yesh HaAmiti, and the perspective of Das Tachten, which is the Ayin of the Yesh HaNivra. And the Rebbe explained that this is why generally Shtalshlus divides into Eris and Kalim, energies and containers. The energies are reflective of the source, the Ayin of the Yesh HaAmiti, and the Kalim are the Ayin of the Yesh HaNivra, because they relate to the structure of existence. And the difference, he says, because Eir is Dovuk, Dvekus Nikeres. The nature of light, energy, is that it's in a very clear and discernible way, you see its connection to its source. Kalim, you don't see, it's connected, but you don't see the connection. It's called Dvekus, built in Nikeres. Okay, so that's why Eir is associated more with representing the source, and Kalim are more identified with the energy, the divine energy that relates to existence. And now begins, we'll start learning inside, is the different Eifanim, the types of Bittul, of this Ayin, of the Yesh HaAmiti. So he says, we know there's four ways, because we learned that in Ayin Beis. In Sadi Dalet, he only covered three, because the Hemshech stops after the third. And here he's going to bring all four like an Ayin Beis, and we'll point out whatever additions there may be, your explanations. So you should be familiar with all these ideas now, because this is really Ayin Beis, the pages that I mentioned, beginning 1150. They found him start with page 1155. Through 1158. So now we're learning inside here, and he says now, Yesh Levai Inyan Zeh, and we can explain this Inyan. What Inyan? The Inyan of Bittul Shebe'er Shu Ayin Ve'efes. The first interpretation, Ayin Amiti. Remember, I forgot to mention, its interpretation means it's completely like only a reflection So it's completely nullified from the perspective of Atzmos, the source. The second ayin of Yesh HaAmit you can't call nullified. It exists, but it's an existence that's not similar, not from the sug, from the same category of existence, our existence. Or the second meaning, that it's not musag. We don't understand. Our tools of comprehension do not relate to the ayin that creates us. So he's going to speak now about the first ayin. The ayin ve'efes, completely nullified. He's going to say, Yesh levayir, this level of ayin, of the Yesh HaAmiti, we can explain b'kamei fanim, a number of ways. And he's going to go through 4 ways, the 4 ways we learned. Eifana aleph, remember, is heder tfisas makim, that it is completely nullified in the presence of its source. Eifana aleph, u'dikiven she'eru davik b'mekere v'nirgish b'mekere, since the Oyer is attached to the source and it feels the source, it's conscious of it. So now, due to it feeling its source, it senses the source, it becomes nullified in a state of has no standing, no value, no function, as we'll learn, in the presence of this source that it senses. And he says, like a wise person, a lesser wise one, in the presence of a greater wise one, he then becomes nullified. His existence becomes nullified in the presence of someone that's superior to him in intelligence. Like a flame, a candle, in the light of the sun, the daylight. Mayahana. What benefit does it have? What benefit does it have? The same thing is above. Again, all this is from Ayin Beis. What do we see by above? The same thing. We say Keser Elyon. Keser Elyon, the supernal crown, which is Keser above. Even though it's the highest level compared to the spheres, it's higher than Chachma and Bina, it's the Keser, the crown. Even though it says only Tzach Mitzukzach, and Ayin Beis said Kadmen. But regardless, even though it's a Tzach, a very refined and very sublime light, Mitzukzach is another term, Tzach Mitzukzach. It's from the same word Tzach, but it's even more refined and a deeper level of refinement, or subtle, or subliminess, not sure. Nevertheless, uchamhu, it's dark. Ucham is dark, black. Kodam ilas elas, as it stands before and in the presence of the source of sources. That's the expression. In Tikkun Ezeh. So what do we see? Exactly the same idea. Keser is like the Chacham cotton. Ilas ilas, the cause of cause, like the Chacham gadol. Or Keser is like the candle. It's light, but it's a candle. Ilas, the cause of cause is like the sun, the daylight, the bright daylight. Tira. So it's nullified. It's ucham. It's like dark in the presence of its source. So that's called heder tfisas makom. It doesn't say it doesn't exist. It says it's nullified. V'gam bittul zeh hu ba'ir dafke v'lei ba'kelim. Again, the Rebbe is going here, adding, which we don't have in the Maimorim. The Ayin Beis and Salik Dal doesn't talk about Eris and Kalim really. It talks on higher levels in Eir itself. But the Rebbe apparently clearly says that this Bittul is also Dafke in Eir, not in Kalim. And he explains why. So this is an addition. The Kivish She'efinis Avos HaKelim Hu Shehem B'dveikus built in the Keres. Remember, we just learned that since the creation of the containers are in a fashion that they are b'dveikus, but built in the keres, you don't see in an obvious and apparent way their connection, attachment to their source, because as I explained, they need to be focused on their function. They can't be focused on the source. They're not like the chief of staff. They are what the source wants them to do, but their focus is on getting the job done. So since their creation is that way, ein nirgish behem b'kedem. So they don't feel in a very conscious way their source. They follow those guidelines. They don't have an independent agenda, but they don't feel it like a v'im kein einim mitzoyim eitzel leben b'kedem, Yiddish leben. That's what they don't find. So conceptually, they're not close. Their existence is not close to the source. The chief of staff, he spends his whole time with the king in the palace. The heads, the department heads, or in this case, you could just say the workers, their job is to go out there and do their work. They can't be close to the king in the mashal I gave. So they're not, they're not there. Only the light, the energy. It's only the light that is in an obvious, attached, and connected way. And it feels its source to the source. And feels its source, due to that consciousness and sense of the source, it's nullified with no standing because it's nullifying the presence of the king, of the presence of the source. So to use the example, if a worker is going to do work and is paid by the orders of the leader, the worker cannot be in a place of headed tfisas mokim, because if he is, he's not going to get the job done. He has to be focused on his work, know what he does well, and does it well. The one that is conveying the orders from the leader or the king, his job is just to convey orders. So he's in the presence of the king all the time, and his function is just to be true to the integrity of the leader. So basically, he maintains and makes sure he preserves the integrity. The workers are doing their job, and whatever that job may be. So yes, there has to be aligned with what the source wants, but technically speaking, they cannot be in a state of complete headed tfisas mokim. So let's go back to the example with the Chacham Gadol and the Chacham Katan. The fact that there's, let's say, a great master, teacher, and now in the presence of that teacher, his student, he doesn't say student here, but let's say a lesser wise one, obviously is nullified. But if this Chacham Katan remains in that state, he will never function. When he leaves the presence of the greater Chacham, now he is a Chacham, like the candle in the light of the sun is nullified. But in the dark, when the sun is not shining, the candle is actually a savior. It brings light. The Chacham, when he goes back to his students, so even though he could be Mekusher to the Chacham Gadol fundamentally, he's connected and he feels that that's where he's getting his energy, but Poel Mamish, he now has to function as a teacher. So he can't be nullified as if like he's not having a function. So the candle has to function as a candle, but when the light of the sun is concealed. So what do you see from this? That there is an element of nullification. There's only an Ur. Keli would not be a Keli if it was nullified in the presence of its source. But the Rebbe is explaining regarding Erdis and Kalim. Again, the levels on Erdis and Kalim. However, Bittul zeh ain't a Bittul b'mitzias. I was moving to the second type of Bittul. This Bittul is not Bittul b'mitzias. It's not that the existing entity, the candle, the Chacham Katan, the worker, my example that I gave, that they're fundamentally not the worker, the chief of staff, that they're fundamentally bottle. No, their mitzias is not really nullified. Their presence, their function, their extension is nullified. So it's not bittul. Bittul ze enen negei be'etzem mitziyusei shala oir. Next page. This bittul does not affect or touch the very being of the oir. Shari habittul dehed tfisas mokim, because this bittul, this nullification of not having any standing, not having any value, hurak mitzad hergish mekere belvad. It's not due because he fundamentally is nullified. It's due to the fact that he senses the source. Like the lesser chacham, the wise one, in comparison to the greater chacham. his nullification, his lack of sense of self, is only when he's in the presence of the Chacham Gadol. Aval b'yesei b'fnei atzmei, when he's on his own, alone, without the Chacham Gadol, harihum b'mitziyusei. He's existent. He's not nullified then. And the same thing is above. The Keser Elyon, Uchamhu Kodamilas Eilis. The supernal crown, Keser, is dark, is black in the presence, Hu Kodam, Ilis Eilis, when it's in the presence and it's aware of, stands before the source, the cause of causes. Hari Bittul Zehu Kiyum Hu Kodam Ilis Eilis Dafka. This Bittul, it says explicitly, it's only because it's Kodam Ilis Eilis, because it's standing before, in the presence of, in contrast to the source of sources. Being that he's standing in that presence and he's before the Ilis Eilis, compared to the cause of causes, he's darkened, he's blackened. But Keser on its own, if you take out the Ilis Eilis, take away the Ilis Eilis, it's a full-blown entity with great power. So this means that there's a bittul, the way the language that he used in Ayin Beis, Tzadik Dalet especially, it's a bittul of his pashtus, the function, the expression, the extension of the Oyer is nullified, but not its very being. Even though I should qualify that in volume 1, he said that even that bittul also affects the being, but it's still not like level 2, which we're going to describe now. So now the Rebbe continues, next paragraph. Yesh bittul naili yeser ba'er. Now, however, there is a higher level of bittul in the Oyer. Hu eifan habeis b'bittul ha'er. This is the second type of bittul in Oyer, of the bittul of Oyer. And what does this add? Sha bittul negeya be'etzem mitziyusei. That the bittul affects, impacts, it touches in the very core of the being of the Oyer itself. V'hainu, this means, she'ima yeshagam bittul zeh mitzad advekus, that though this bittul also comes from dvekus, it's not just due to the fact that it has it, it's due to the fact that Oyer is attached to its source. Just like level 1 is attached to its source and aware of its source. Nevertheless, so even though it's due to attachment, but the attachment now has deeper impact on the Oyer. In the first level, the impact is the attachment is, I'm nullified before you, my function, my extension, my expression. Here, the bittul affects, the attachment affects the very being of the Oyer itself. Va'inyan b'zeh. And what's the inyan in this? He's going to explain this. Because the Oyer is attached and cleaved and bound to b'mekeda in its source, in a discernible, clear, nikeres way. It's clear and obvious, not b'dvekas built in nikeres like the kalim, like he said earlier. And its entire existence is only because it's attached to its source. Here's now the addition. We didn't say that by the Chacham Katan. It doesn't say the Chacham Katan, his whole existence is due to the Chacham Gadol. It may be, but in that level, it's not necessarily the case. He's standing in front of that Chacham Gadol, he's nullified. But it's not necessarily sensing that my whole being is due to my source, due to the Chacham Gadol in his case. Here, he senses the Kol Mitziyusei is only due to its attachment to its source, like we see in the light of the sun. When the luminary, the sun, the body of the sun, sets, sunset, or even when it's the middle of the day, not sunset, and there are clouds that are covering up this ala shemesh on the sun, ozem is batla what do we see? The Oyer disappears. If the sun is not there, the air is not there. Not just the air's function, it just doesn't there, it's not existent altogether. We learned more detail what's the difference between sunset and the clouds. Obviously, he's talking about very intense clouds, because if it's talking about just a cloudy day, the sunlight is still coming through the clouds. So he's talking about basically real cover-up. Take away the source, the light disappears. If you take away the Chacham Gadol from the Chacham Katan in the first level of Bittul, he doesn't disappear. On the contrary, he shines. You take away the sunlight from the candle doesn't disappear. It actually begins to shine and have an effect. Here, the air is sensing level 2 that its entire being and existence is not just it's attached, but it can't exist without the source. And its entire existence is entirely dependent and due to its dvekus, its attachment to and connected to the source. Sever the connection and the light disappears. So now this attachment and hergish, the feeling that you are entirely dependent on and don't exist without the source, that impacts and affects the Ayin that its mitzvah should be completely nullified, because it senses it's not me, it's the source. Again, in level 1, that's not necessarily the sense of the Chacham Katan. The candle doesn't say the sun is my source. It's just that I don't function in this presence of something so great, much greater than I am. So now it's mitzvah lagash shekol mitzvah hirak mitzad hamoyer. Its entire existence only due to the moyer, to the luminary, the source of the light. V'hainu. This means the avshi yeshne mitzvah se'er. We're not saying there's no mitzvah of air. There's sunlight. Though there is a mitzvah se'er, mekomok mitzvah zu he be bittul legamri. This mitzvah is bittul in its very being completely. Shekol mitzvah hirak hurak mitzad hamoyer. I'm not sure why it says he once and then who. Okay. Its entire existence is only due to the moyer. Bittul zeh, now he's going to give it the name that Ayin Beis gives it. This is called the Bittul zeh hu bittul de ein zuloscha. The Bittul of ein zuloscha. There's no other but you. Ein zuloscha. Shemi biladoi ein shum mitzias klal. Because without him, meaning without God, without the source, there's no mitzias at all of the light. Omnom, now he's going to qualify this as well. So we have now level 2, type 2, but it also has a limitation. What's the limitation here? Omnom gam bittul zeh, however, also this bittul, av shenegeya be'etzem hamitzir shalei, even though, as in contrast to level 1, it is negeya, touches and affects the very existence of the Ayin, not just its function. Its very existence is completely just due to its source. Because without the luminary, there's no mitzvah, it doesn't have any existence, the Ayin. We call mitzvah rak mitzad hamoyer, and its entire existence only due to its source. Nevertheless, Yesh mitzvahs. Nevertheless, we don't say it doesn't exist. We're just saying its entire existence. You don't say sunlight doesn't exist. You say it exists, but its entire existence is due to its source. Take away the source, the sunlight disappears. In the first level, even that's not there. The first level of Bittul, even when you take away the sunlight, it doesn't disappear. It has its own identity. It just nullified in the presence of the sun. Here, you don't say it doesn't exist. You just say it exists, but its entire existence is dependent on the source. It exists, and its existence is due to its source, the luminary, the sun, the moyer, the source of the light. This bittul is telling us only that without the moyer, without the source of light, there's no metzius of light. But with the moyer, if the moyer is present, the sun is shining, there is a metzius of oyer. And the oyer is not the moyer. Good. So now the next paragraph is going to be the third level. The Yesh Bittul Naila Yeser Be'er. There's a higher level of Bittul. This is the third type in the Bittul of Eir. So far what we learned, even though there are some words the Rebbe adds in explaining it, but it's essentially, we learned this in Ayin Beis and in Tzadik Dal, just pointing that out. Now we go to third Eif. The Bittul Zeh, who Gamke Mitzad Advekus. And here too, just like the first two levels, it also is due to its attachment to its source. So in other words, like we said clearly in Ayin Beis, all levels of Bittul are due to the fact that they're attached and connected and aware of their source. The question is how much impact it has on the Oyer. So we've learned the first two levels. Now this one is also Mitzad Advekus. However, what distinguishes it from level 2, and for sure level 1, Habitlu ba'efer shagam im hamoyer emitzius er klal. So in level 2, we said without the source, the light disappears. With the source, there's light. Now he's saying that even with the source, the light is as it's non-existent. It would be like saying the sunlight, when the sun is there, the light of the sun, the sunlight is not at all doing anything because it's so bottled to its source. So that's what he's saying now, that even when the moyer is there, without the moyer, there's no sunlight, absolutely. But even with the moyer, the existence of air doesn't have anything, any sense of self, even with the source that's giving it light, because as we're going to learn, because all it is an expression of the source. That's its main sense, its entire sense of being. As we learned in Ayin Beis and Tzadik Dalet. So again, I'm not going over all the explanations in this because this is really, our goal here is just to go over the Rebbe's Maimers so we have a complete picture of how the Rebbe Rashab, the Frierdiker Rebbe, and the Rebbe explained this idea. And if there's a nuance or an explanation, obviously I'll point it out. But I'm not, if you want explanation in this, I suggest you go back to the classes where we learned this in the original Ayin Beis and Tzadik Dalet. And now he's going to bring, this is clearly from Ayin Beis and Tzadik Dalet sites as well, the comparison to the Bittul of Nivroim that the Alter Rebbe says in Shiur Yichud V'Amunah. This is level 3. V'hu al derech Masher Kosov Admur Hazokn B'shar HaYichud V'Amunah. This is similar, al derech, not exact, to what the Alter Rebbe writes in Shiur Yichud V'Amunah. Be'inyan Bittul HaNevroim. The matter about Bittul HaNevroim, the nullification of all the creatures, creations, that they're truly only due to the divine force that gives them energy, he's going to say. She'ilo nitna reshus la'ayin lires. Here the Rebbe brings directly that lashon. I don't think in Ayin Beis and Tzadik Dalet brought that lashon. Maybe Tzadik Dalet, yeah. That were the eye given permission to see, ulahasig, and to comprehend, the sustenance or the energy and the spirituality, the spiritual divine energy in every creation. If that would be the case, that the eye was given permission to see. So he says, Lo our eye would not at all see. He says, Gashmis hanivra, the physicality of the creation. V'chumrei, its crassness or its coarseness. Umamoshe, and its tangibility. Chumrei could also be more, not necessarily crassness. I think here more chomer is Gashmis is the physical entity. Chomer is its strong, defined presence, and Mamoshe is its tangibility. It's kind of the fact that it's tangible. Nida klal. All of this would not be nida klal einenu. Would not be seen by our eyes because we would see the energy and the object would be completely not seen, only the energy within that object. Now, as I explained then, this doesn't mean that the energy of, let's say, rakia, of heaven, is similar to the energy of vegetation, the energies are different, but the energy would be the focus because that's the real force that's giving it power. It's a little like an example that I've given, that when you're absorbed in reading a book and you get so taken by the message and the sentiment being conveyed that you don't even see the letters. You don't even see the words. Obviously, they're there. But what all you're hearing and feeling is the story being told. Same thing, a good speaker. If they get your heart and soul, you're not focusing on what exact words they're using. You just get so captivated by the experience. So what you're seeing is the energy within the words, not the words themselves, as an example. Because now, if if that's not allowed us to see, then we focus on whatever we can hold on to, the physicality of it all. Because the nivra, Gashmi, is completely bottled, nullified. In comparison, or Lagabi, when you relate it to the chayz, its vitality, and the ruchnius, and the spiritual energy within it. Why is this the case? Because they're not two entities. The only reason we see it is because we're not shown that energy. But take away mibila de ruchnius, hoya ayin ve'efes mamish. This is all the language from Tanya, from Shayichad Vamuna. Take away the ruchnius, it would be like taking away the whole. Taking away the ruchnius, the whole physicality would be ayin ve'efes mamish. Va'ruchnius hashefei alav, and the ruchnius and the spirit that flows over it. Memoitze pi avaya, the ruach piv, that comes out of the mouth, God's breath, God's words. Memoitze pi avaya, from the gutturals of mouth, God's mouth, and the breath from his mouth. Hu levade hametzie tomid me'efes va'ayin liyesh mahava ese. That alone, nothing else, only that is what constantly draws out from a state of nothingness. Remember, existence would not exist without that. So it's constantly drawing out. In other words, God is breathing, wishing, willing existence. So it's constantly, essentially breathing and speaking the words and the divine energy that gives life to existence, and that brings it into being. Im kain efes bilodei be'emes. Therefore, this very existence, this physical existence we're talking about, Shaykh V'Amuna, is nothing, completely nothing in truth, without that energy. So if you think about it, it's not just an existing entity that happens to be dependent on some support from God. Its entire existence is God's breath, or God's words, or God's divine energy. It has no emes without that. Now with it exists, we said. But if you really get to the deeper feeling of it, its entire existence is only divine energy. That's what it's meant to be. Now you may recall that the Frierdiker Rebbe actually dissects these two phrases in Shaykh Damuna, and he attributes the first statement to level 2 of the Bittul, and the second half to level 3. The Rebbe is going more with what it says in Ayin Beis, that doesn't really break it down, but it's pretty clear that it's two states here. Because there's one element, like in level 2, we also said that the Eir is constantly aware of its source, and if there's no source, there's no Eir. But there's a Metzius. There's a Metzius that senses that. So the Friedrich Rebbe explained that was the first half of Shayachet Vamuna, that without the spirituality, it doesn't exist. But then he said the second half, where it says, he says, Hulavade. There the focus is that the entire thing is only due to God wanting to create. There he uses the word efes bilodei be'emes. Friedrich Rebbe made a whole thing about the word be'emes, that it's a deeper level of bittul, saying not only am I dependent on my source, but all I am is just an expression of my source. But here again, the Rebbe goes very much, this is similar to the Ayin Beis flow, where he doesn't break it down, but with Tzadi Daled, you see that breakdown. Continues the Rebbe. And the same thing is with the Eir. Remember, this example from Shayachet Vamuna was coming to explain level 3 of Bittul. So it says, and this keeps on being the focus of the Rebbe, the Dveikus Nikeres. In Ayin Beis and Tzadik Daled, it's not focused on quite as strong. Just pointing out this addition, since it's attached to its source, in a very obvious and conscious Dveikus, Nirgish Boy, next page, She'ein B'chinas Mitzias Klal. In this third level, it senses it's not at all in existence. Its entire existence is only Atzmus. And what is this Bittul called? Bittul zeh hu bittul de efes biltecha. This Bittul is called efes biltecha. Efes, not just Ayin, not just Ein Zuloscha. There's no other but you. Here, efes biltecha, zilch. Absolutely nothing biltecha without you. V'hainu, and the Rebbe explains the bittul habeis shu bittul de'en zoloscha. The second level of bittul, which is the bittul of nothing other than you, hurak shemi bilode hamoyer emitzias. There, the bittul is only that without the source, there's no existence, as opposed to level 1. That without the source, there is existence. Meaning, it's all due to the fact that it feels and senses the source. If it doesn't feel and sense it, it's headed physis mokim, like we learned. Here, the only thing is that without the source, there's no mitzias. Aval ima moyer. But if the source is there and supporting it and giving it energy, ima moyer umitzada moyer. That also the moyer is giving it space. Yeshne eza mitzias. That's a suffering. That word umitzad hamoyer is the Rebbe's addition. It doesn't say that in Ayin Beis or Tzadik Daled. So he's saying that with the moyer, level 2, and due to the moyer wants Eir to be there. The sun wants sunlight, and Atzmus wants Eir to have some type of existence. However, its existence is utterly dependent on only due to the source. So, Yesh is a Metzias. Yesh is a Metzias. However, the level 3 is that even with the moyer, Bittul de efes biltecha, level 3, efes biltecha hu shagam ima moyer e mitzias klal. Even with the moyer, all it is Atzmus expressing himself. Ki'im hamoyer bulvad. What is sensed there is not an existence that's completely dependent. It's a non-existence altogether. This is the existence of Eir, that all it is the moyer itself, allowing to be revealed in the state of Eir. Again, I know you may have questions, but this was all discussed and explained quite at length, both when we learned Ayin Beis and Tzadik Daled. Now, the next paragraph is now going to introduce level 4. Level 4, we just learned in Ayin Beis the other day. And here, there is some language from the Rebbe that helps frame it a little more, a little sharper So we'll compare this to Ayin Beis shortly, but first let's learn it inside. So now the Rebbe says like this, and this is not stated in Ayin Beis. If you look at Ayin Beis, he just jumps to level 4. The Rebbe is going to give an introduction to level 4 by explaining that all 3 levels we just learned are in one category, and level 4 introduces another level of Bittul that's a completely different type. It says, Vihine, and now, Gimel Efanim Hanal, the 3 types of Bittul that we discussed until now, above, the Bittul Ha'er, the 3 Efanim and Bittul Ha'er, the 3 above discussed levels or types of the Bittul, of the nullification of Ha'er. Remember, Heder Tfisas Makim, that its function is nullified in the presence of the greater source. 2, Ein Zoloscha, its entire existence is dependent on the source. 3, it doesn't even have an existence with the source. All it is the source expressing itself. So he says, all these 3, Hemrak Mitzad Ha'er, they're all 3 due to the Ha'er itself, only through the Ha'er. That the Ha'er has these 3 levels of Bittul. We'll understand what that means in a moment. Ach, yesh efen naila yeser bebitl ha'er. There's a higher type of Bittul of Ha'er. Efen hadalet. This is the 4th type. For who, and what is this? Kamosha moyer yodeya es ha'er. It's how the moyer knows the Ha'er. Until now, we were talking about how the Ha'er knows the moyer. So the Ha'er either is nullified, like the candle in light of the sun, or its entire existence it knows is dependent on the source, so it doesn't have any existence of its own, or its entire being is just an expression of the moyer. But it's all the Ha'er as it's looking at the moyer in 3 different levels, one deeper than the other. This one now is how the moyer looks at the Ha'er. The Rebbe Rashab doesn't quite say it that way. It's not a contradiction, obviously. In Efen Adal, he says, it's Yesh be'adei amiti. So the Rebbe is adding this aspect. It's how the moyer looks at the Ha'er. Or how moyer yodei ha'er, how the moyer perceives the Ha'er, would be more accurate. The kamoisha moyer yodei ha'er umabit alav, the way the source knows the light, and mabit alav, and looks at it, gazes at it. Obviously, this is all a mashal. He's trying to explain how the moyer looks at the Ha'er, not how the Ha'er looks at the moyer. It's obviously, well, it doesn't say obviously, that when the light, the source, looks at the Ha'er, it's a completely different Efen. So level 4 is completely different than the other 3. Other 3 are all about the Ha'er's experience, to the highest level that the Ha'er doesn't experience anything, because all it is the source expressing itself. But remember we discussed in Ayin Beis that just tells you that the Ha'er, all it is an expression of the moyer, Atzmos. But it doesn't tell you anything about Atzmos. What does Atzmos have to say about this? So level 4 is what the moyer is now introducing, its perspective. Ubitl zeh, and this 4th level of Bittul, Kamoshu mitzad hamoyer, now he adds what he says in Ayin Beis, it's not exclusive to the moyer, is now going to infuse that into Ha'er. So this Bittul, the way it's mitzad hamoyer, nimtza gam kem ba'Ha'er, is also found in the Ha'er. But it's not the Ha'er mitzad atzmei. It's not the Ha'er do it to itself. It's the moyer looking at, perceiving the Ha'er, and the Ha'er now is getting a sense of what the moyer is thinking about it, so to speak. So till now, the Ha'er was expressing its Bittul to its source, it's attached to its source, and therefore his Bittul in the 3 levels. Now the Ha'er is assuming and getting a sense of what the moyer sees. Back to that, being that the Ha'er is in an obvious attached state to its source, that's why, because of that dvekus. So also what the moyer, how the moyer, also the fact that the moyer knows it, how the moyer knows the mishtakif, says in Yiddish, spiegelt sich up, it reflects, gam bo'er. So if the didn't have that bittul, how would it ever know what the moyer has to say about it? But because the is so bittul, it doesn't have any identity of its own, it now can listen, so to speak, and absorb also that how the moyer looks at the So to use an example, we talked about this as well, but I'll just explain it now because the Rebbe adds this emphasis of how the moyer sees the So you have a student of a student and teacher. The student is a smart student and has information, knowledge, can teach others. So level one, obviously, when he's standing in the presence of his teacher, he's not going to speak. He's going to be nullified. If his students were there, they would look and say, why is he quiet? He's quiet because he's now standing with someone so far greater than him. So as great as he was on his own, now in the presence of his teacher, quiet, nullified, like the candle in light of the sun. Now, there's a deeper level that the student can have before the teacher, and that is that all he knows, every word that he's studied, and the way he teaches his students, all it is coming from his teacher. In the first way I just said, the first step may not be the case. He may have learned on his own, he may have become an independent chacham, and so on. But the second one, the students see that their teacher, everything he says, is either very clear or he spells it out, is coming from his teacher. Basically saying, I would be not me, I wouldn't have any of this intelligence were it not for my teacher. And I'm always just know that, fully cognizant of that. So that's like level 2. Level 3 would not even have the capacity to be even that because there's no existence. All he is invisible. The student wouldn't be even visible. We talked about, let's say, if you really were a good maniach or chayzer of the Rebbe, all you are is a mouthpiece. You're not an existent entity and my whole mitzias is due to my source. All you are is the source expressing itself. So if you're able to really see it, you only see the teacher. And this student that I'm describing here would just be an invisible veil that's translating or some way expressing it. He's like a megaphone of the teacher. And the megaphone doesn't have any sense of self at all because all it is expressing the teacher. In level, all these 3, however, don't tell you what does the teacher have in mind. This is all the oyer, how bottle is the student, his teacher, and to the highest level. But it's not about the teacher on his own. Now comes another level where the teacher is beginning to express himself and say, let me tell you what I'm thinking about all this. Not the student says, listen, I'm bottle in one of the 3 ways to my teacher, but the teacher's what the teacher has in mind. Like we spoke with the artist, about the muscle of the artist. You can find out from the art, can be completely bottled to the artist, but what is the mohus? What does the artist have to say about his own personality? And that is the level 4. So he says like this. For Ifana Dalid. Oh, 1 second. One final sentence. And that revelation of the Moir's perspective, because the Oyer is bottle, it carries it. So the Oyer now has a 4th dimension of how the Moir looks at it. Not how the Oyer is looking at the Moir, but how the Moir looks at the Oyer. And the Oyer itself adopts that and is able to assimilate that in this level 4. Okay. So now he says like this. For Eifan Adal bebitla Oyer, hu be'ena rech legamri, legabel gimel efani habitl shalifnei zeh. This 4th type of bittul that we just described is eina rech legamri. A big statement. I don't think that's said in any of the Maimarim. This is additions from the Rebbe. So here the Rebbe is explaining level 4 of Ayin Beis with his Sofas. So he says like this, that it's completely, infinitely distant. Compared to the 3 previous levels of Bittul. Val derech, and the Rebbe is explaining, this distance is al derech, is similar to ha'ein harech da'amoyer legaber. We've learned that length earlier. If you compare source to light, how close are they? It's ein harech. One is the etzem, one is a reflection. Even if the oyer is completely bottled at the highest level, it's still not the moyer, because the oyer does not have to exist. Atzmus doesn't have to give off oyer, and loiza ikara atzmus, as we learned, this is not the primary thing of atzmus, is to shine. The sun was created to shine. Atzmus doesn't have to shine. He's altogether not subject to the need for gilui or not gilui altogether. So it's ein harech moyer and oyer. Only once there's oyer, the oyer is, as we spoke about, its existence is meant to reflect the source. It's not a yesh that has an independent identity. But the existence of oyer itself is ein harech to the moyer. So the Rebbe is saying now, this ein harech is the same thing, the difference between level 4 of Bittul and the first 3 levels. Just like the moyer is ein harech, infinitely distant from its reflection, the oyer, keinu gama ein harech, the Bittul shemitzad hamoyer legaba Bittul shemitzad oyer. Same thing, the Bittul mitzad hamoyer is different than the Bittul mitzad oyer. In other words, going back to my mashal, the student, at the end of the day, he's not the teacher. The only question is, how nullified is he before the teacher? Is it just in his function? Is it also his existence? Or is it to the point that he doesn't even have an existence? All his existence is the source. So that's all talking about the student. So the student knows, obviously, that the teacher is beyond him. But once you're speaking from the Moyer's point of view, you're talking about a completely different reality. Or to use the words we use, built to Metzias Nimtza, compared to Metzias Nimtza, even the highest levels of Metzias Nimtza, even the highest levels of Bittul don't compare to built to Metzias Nimtza. It's a different reality. But that reality of Atzmus, or in this case, the teacher is now being revealed in the Oyer because of its Bittul. But it's not something the student could ever come to on his own, because he's not the teacher. But the teacher, because he's bottled to the teacher, so what he's saying now is, yes, so now he says, that it's ein harech gaba Bittul shemitzad ha'oyer. Why? Because the way the Moyer sees oyer is altogether not necessary. Because am atzmus, you're oyer. And now he says, and the oyer also becomes part of that sense too. This 4th level is a level also in oyer, because the oyer now realizes not only am I nullified, not only am I dependent on, not only am I just an expression of the source, but the truth is I completely don't exist because I don't need to exist. It's only the atzmus, hamoyer, that is relevant. So he says like this, V'gam bittul zeh, shemitzad hamoyer nimtza ba'oyer. So the Moyer looks at the Oyer and all of existence, for that matter. That's completely Ayin ve'efes. This Bittul from beside the Moyer, the 4th level, also exists within Oyer. Liyese dovik b'mkere canal, being that the Oyer is attached to its source. So that attachment gives it something from the source that it itself would never have arrived at. Move on. And from all this we understand before I continue, let me give an example. I'll give an example. The example is going to be from a set of numbers. So we have like this. In mathematics, you have the set of finite numbers. 1, and it goes on indefinitely. But it's still a set of finite numbers. It could be very large finite, it could be trillion, zillion, billion, so on. Or it could be 1. Then you have the set of infinite number. Infinity, we know, is infinitely distant from finite. In other words, no matter how far you go with the finite numbers, even the highest numbers, they're all equal compared to the infinite. Because infinite is not made up of units. It's an infinite, it's actually a theoretical concept in mathematics, but it's the state of infinity. But they both have still something in common. What? They're both numbers. This is infinite, this is finite. In other words, if you said 1 and a zillion is not closer to infinite than 1 is. They're both equally distant. But if you said, does the infinite set not recognize the finite numbers? No, it recognizes it. However, it sees 1 and a zillion as completely not infinitely distant from it. But in other words, the chsaron, what's the word I want to use? The deficiency of of finite numbers is not in what they are. There's nothing wrong with 1, 2, 3, 4 is recognized by infinite. It's what they're not. They're not infinite. But you can't say that an infinite set of numbers does not value or does not recognize numbers. It just recognizes that they're infinitely apart. Now, what about if you talk about a level that numbers altogether don't matter? Like the world of apples don't recognize oranges altogether. I don't know if that's a good example because they're both fruit. But let's say you're talking about a level where I don't care, finite, infinite, they're both equal to me because I don't value numbers. Numbers are not yet have any value. So not only is the deficiency of the finite and the infinite due to what they don't have, even what they are doesn't have any value. So when you talk about and Moyer now, you can have a level of Bittul that I'm only 1, and compared to, let's say, a zillion, I'm nullified. Compared to infinite, I'm nullified even more because what is 1 compared to the infinite? What is a zillion compared to infinite? But what I am, you can't take away because infinity recognizes me. I exist. The problem is I'm only finite. I'm not forever. I'm not eternal. But then as you climb and you continue to the higher levels of Bittul, you come to realize that my existence, my entire being is dependent on, or as finally in level 3, the earth comes to realize all I am is an expression of that higher level, but I am an expression. He wants me. He wants me to express himself through me, even level 3. I'm not saying there's a consciousness. I'm just using it in a figurative way. But when you talk about the Moyer now, the Moyer, Oyer, and no Oyer are equal. So B'chlal has no makom. In the highest level of Oyer, you can only say is Mitzias Nimtza, the built Mitzias Nimtza wants Mitzias Nimtza to do something. He wants existence. But on level 4, even what it is doesn't have value. In level 3, we said it doesn't exist because all of its existence is Atzmus. But it's still Atzmus through Oyer. In level 4, the whole thing turns around. From an Atzmus point of view, Oyer and no Oyer are equal. And even Oyer comes to recognize that. So that's a level of Bittul that is so deep that even what I am doesn't have anything. Not only what I'm not. That's how I would partially explain this 4th level. Because you're talking now about Bittul that it's completely beyond existence and non-existence. Whereas in the first 3, at the end of the day, it's Oyer coming to perceive itself to the point, the farthest point, that I have no existence of my own, or I have no existence because all I am is an expression of the source, but I am an expression of the source. And here, it's a point where it's such a Bittul, because Moyer is completely a different reality. It's built to Mitzias Nimtza. And you realize, compared to built to Mitzias Nimtza, not only is it not built to Mitzias Nimtza, what it is has no significance. Its only significance is that Atzmus gives it significance. We always have to add that line. So let me just finish the last few lines here, and then we can go back to Ayin Beis next class. He says, U'mekol zeh muvan. From all this we understand. This is like the conclusion of literally the words in Ayin Beis, and we'll call them move on. That the light that is attached to its source, it's the Ayin of the Yesh HaAmiti, Shu Ayin ve'efes mamish. It's totally nullified. Whatever level is a nullification. It's only a question of what extent. Mashenken HaKelim. The Rebbe goes back to Kelim. Mashenken HaKelim. The containers, is built in the keres dafka. Their form of creation is dafka in a form that their attachment is not nikar, not obvious, not discernible. And the creation of the containers is only from a reflection of a reflection. A reflection of a reflection, Chassidus explains, is nivdelis, means there's a separation, because from the kelim you don't feel the source in a direct way, so there's like a certain type of leap. That's why the kelim are the ayin of the yesh hanivra. She'enim ayin ve'efes be'emes. That are not in a state of total nullified state like oir. Actually, I should correct myself. The ayin of the yesh hanivra is not ayin ve'efes be'emes. You can't say it's completely nullified. The reason it's called ayin is because they're not from the same material. They're not from the same matter of existence of the creation, nivra, va'ayin she'ena musug, and they're not understood by us. We don't understand and comprehend their reality. So that's the ayin of Yesh HaAmit, ayin Yesh HaNivra. So the Rebbe did add this, and we're going to learn that's now in Ayin Beis. So we're going to stop here. I finished with the Maimer and Friedrich of the Rebbe. We will go back to the Rebbe's Maimer later, once we learn more in Ayin Beis, and we'll see how the Rebbe explains that. So I'm going to stop here at the end in page 15, the end of the Siv Gimel, in the Maimer BaYom Shemini Atzeres Tavshin Tezvav. And the next class, we're going to continue on the bottom of page 1115.